Hi guys, welcome to chapter 17 and 18. Enjoy! Today is declared an unscheduled holiday. Jonas, his parents, and Lily all turned in surprise and looked at the wall speaker from which the announcement had come. It happened so rarely and was such a treat for the entire community when it did. Adults were exempted from the day's work, children from school and training and volunteer hours. The substitute laborers, who would be given a different holiday, took over all of the necessary tasks. Nurturing, food delivery, the care of the old, and the community was free. Jonas cheered and put his homework folder down. He had been about to leave for school. School was less important to him now, and before much more time passed, his formal schooling would be at an end. But still, for 12s, though, they had begun their adult training. There were the endless lists of rules to be memorized and the newest technology to be mastered. He wished his parents, sister, and Gabe a happy day and rode down the bike path looking for Asher. He had not taken the pills for 4 weeks, and the stirrings had returned, and he felt a little guilty and embarrassed about those dreams that came to him as he slept. But he knew he couldn't go back to the world of no feelings that he had lived in for so long. And his new heightened feelings permeated a greater realm than simply just his sleep. Though he knew that his failure to take the pills accounted for some of it, he thought that the feelings came also from the memories. Now he could see all the colors, and he could keep them too, so that the trees and the grass and the bushes swayed green in his vision. Gabriel's rosy cheeks stayed pink, even when he slept, and the apples were always red. Now, through the memories, he had seen oceans and mountain lakes and streams that gurgled through the woods, and now he saw the familiar wide river beside the path differently. He saw all the light and color, and history in it that it contained and carried in its slow-moving water. And he knew that there was an elsewhere from which it came, and an elsewhere to which it was going. On this unexpected casual holiday he felt so happy, as he always had on holidays, but with a deeper happiness than ever before. Thinking as he always did about precision of language, Jonas realized that it was a new depth of feeling that he was experiencing. Somehow they were not at all the same as the feelings that every evening, in every dwelling, every citizen analyzed with endless chit-chat. I felt angry because someone broke the play area rules, Lily had said once, making a fist with her small hand to indicate her fury. Her family, Jonas among them, had talked about the possible reasons for rule breaking and the need for understanding and patience until Lily's fists had relaxed and her anger was gone. But Lily had felt no real anger, Jonas realized now. Shallow impatience and exasperation, that was all Lily had felt. He knew that with certainty because now he knew what anger was. Now he had, in the memories, experienced injustice and cruelty, and he had reacted with rage that welled up so passionately inside of him that the thought of discussing it calmly at the evening meal was unthinkable. I felt sad today, he had heard his mother say, and they had comforted her. And now that Jonas had experienced real sadness, he had felt grief. He knew that there was no quick comfort for emotions like those. These were deeper, and they did not need to be told. They were felt. Today, he felt true happiness. Asher! He spied his friend's bicycle leaning against a tree at the edge of the playing field. Nearby, other bikes were strewn about on the ground. On a holiday, the usual rules of order could be disregarded. He skidded to a stop and dropped his own bike beside the others. "Hey, Ash!" he shouted, looking around. There seemed to be no one in the play area. "Where are you?" "Shoo!" A child's voice coming from behind a nearby bush made a sound. "Pow, pow, pow!" A female 11 named Tanya staggered forward from where she had been hiding. Dramatically, she clutched her stomach and stumbled out in a zigzag pattern, groaning. "You got me!" she called, and fell to the ground, grinning. Blam! Jonas, standing on the side of the playing field, recognized Asher's voice, and he saw his friend, aiming an imaginary weapon in his hand, dart from behind one tree to another. Blam! You're in the line of my ambush, Jonas! Watch out! Jonas stepped back. He moved behind Asher's bike and knelt so that he was out of sight. It was a game he had often played with the other children, a game of good guys and bad guys, a heartless pastime that used up their contained energy and ended only when they all lay posed in freakish postures on the ground. He had never recognized it before as a game of war. Attack! The shout came from behind the small storehouse where play equipment was kept. Three children dashed forward, their imaginary weapons in firing position. From the opposite side of the field came an opposing shout, Counterattack! From their hiding places, a horde of children, Jonas recognized Fiona in the group, emerged, running in a crouched position, firing across the field. Several of them stopped, grabbed their own shoulders and chests with exaggerated gestures, and proceeded to be hit. They dropped to the ground and lay suppressing giggles. Feelings surged with Jonas. He found himself walking forward into the field. You're hit, Jonas! Asher yelled from behind the tree. Pow! You're hit again! Jonas stood alone in the center of the field. Several of the children raised their heads and looked at him uneasily. The attacking army slowed, emerged from their crouched positions, and watched to see what he was doing. In his mind, Jonas saw again the face of the boy who had lain dying in the field and had begged for water. He had a sudden choking feeling, as if it were difficult to breathe. One of the children raised an imaginary rifle and made an attempt to destroy him with a firing noise. Pshoo! Then they were all silent, standing awkwardly, and the only sound was the sound of Jonas's shuddering breaths. He was struggling not to cry. Gradually, when nothing happened, nothing changed. The children looked at each other nervously and went away. He heard the sounds as they righted their bicycles and began to ride down the path that led from the field. Only Asher and Fiona remained. What's wrong, Jonas? It was only a game, Fiona said. You ruined it, Asher said in an irritated voice. Don't play it anymore, Jonas pleaded. I'm the one who's training for assistant recreation director, Asher pointed out angrily. Games aren't your area of experience. Expertise, Jonas corrected him automatically. Whatever. You can't say what we play, even if you are going to be the new receiver. Asher looked warily at him. I apologize for not paying you the respect that you deserve, he mumbled. Asher, Jonas said, and he was trying to speak carefully and with kindness to say exactly what he wanted to say. You had no way of knowing this. I didn't know it myself until recently, but it's a cruel game. In the past, I said I apologize, Jonas. Jonas sighed. It was no use. Of course Asher couldn't understand. I accept your apology, Asher, he said warily. Do you want to go for a ride along the river, Jonas? Fiona asked, biting her lip with nervousness. Jonas looked at her. She was so lovely. For a fleeting instant he thought he would like nothing better than to ride peacefully along the river path, laughing and talking with his gentle female friend. But he knew that such times had been taken from him now, and he shook his head. After a moment, his two friends turned and went to their bikes, and he watched as they rode away. Jonas trudged to the beach beside the storehouse and sat down, overwhelmed with feelings of loss. His childhood, his friendships, his sense of carefree security, all of these things seemed to be slipping away. And with his new heightened feelings, he was overwhelmed by sadness at the way others had laughed and shouted, playing at war. But he knew that they could not understand why, without the memories. He felt such love for Asher and Fiona, but they could not feel it back without the memories. And he could not give them those. Jonas knew with certainty that he could change nothing. Back in their dwelling that evening, Lily chattered merrily about the wonderful holiday she had had, playing with her friends, having her midday meal out of doors, and, she confessed, taking a very short try on her father's bicycle. I can't wait to get my very own bicycle next month, she said. Father's is too big for me and I fell, she explained matter-of-factly. Good thing Gabe wasn't in the child seat. A very good thing, Mother agreed, frowning at the idea of it. Gabriel waved his arms at the mention of himself, and he began to walk just the week before. The first steps of a new child were always the occasion for celebration at the nurturing center, Father said, but also for the introduction of a discipline wand. Now Father brought the slender instrument home with him each night, in case Gabriel misbehaved. But he was a happy and easygoing toddler. Now he moved unsteadily across the room, laughing. "Yay!" he chirped. "Yay, yay!" And it was the sound of as he was trying to say his own name. Jonas brightened. It was a depressing day for him after such a bright start. But he had set his glum thoughts aside, and he thought about starting to teach Lily to ride so that she could speed off proudly after her ceremony of 9, which would be coming soon. It was hard to believe that it was almost December again, that almost a year had passed since he became a 12. He smiled as he watched the new child plant one small foot carefully before the other, grinning with glee at his own steps as he tried them out. "I want to get to sleep early tonight," Father said. "Tomorrow's a busy day for me. The twins are being born tomorrow, and the test results show that they're identical." "One for here, one for elsewhere," Lily chanted. "One for here, one for Do you actually take it elsewhere, Father?" Jonas asked. "No, I just have to make the selection. I weigh them, hand the larger one over to the nurturer who's standing by waiting, and then I get the smaller one all cleaned up and comfy. Then I perform a small ceremony of release," and he glanced down, grinning at Gabriel. "Then I wave bye-bye," he said, in a special sweet voice that he used when he spoke to a new child. He waved his hand in the familiar gesture. Gabriel giggled and waved bye-bye back to him. "And somebody else comes to get him? Somebody from elsewhere?" "That's right, Jonas Bonus." Jonas rolled his eyes in embarrassment that his father had used that silly pet name. Lily was deep in thought. Well, what if they give the little twin a name elsewhere, a name like, I don't know, maybe Jonathan? And here in the community, at his naming, the twin that we kept here, they gave the name Jonathan. And there would be 2 children with the same name, and they would look exactly the same. And someday, maybe when they were 6, one group of 6s would go visit the other community on a bus, and there in the other community, in the other group of 6s, would be a Jonathan who was exactly the same as the other Jonathan. And then maybe they would get mixed up and take the wrong Jonathan home, and maybe his parents wouldn't notice, and then, she paused for breath. "Lily," Mother said, "I have a wonderful idea. Maybe when you become a 12, they'll give you the assignment of storyteller. I don't think we've had a storyteller in the community for a long time. But if I were on the committee, I would definitely choose that job for you." Lily grinned. "I have a better idea for one more story," she announced. "What if we were all twins and didn't know it, and so elsewhere there would be another Lily and another Jonas and another Father and another Asher and another Chief Elder and another—" Father groaned. "Lily," he said, "it's bedtime." Here we go, chapter 18. "Giver," Jonas asked that afternoon, "do you ever think about release?" "Do you mean my own release or just the general topic of release?" "Both, I guess." I apologize. I should have been more precise, but I don't know exactly what I meant. Sit back up. No need to lie down while we're talking. Jonas, who had already been stretched out on the bed when the question came to his mind, sat back up. "I guess I do think about it occasionally," the giver said. "I think about my own release when I'm in an awful lot of pain. I wish I could put in a request for it sometimes, but I'm not permitted to do that until the new receiver is trained." "Me," Jonas said, in a dejected voice. He was not looking forward to the end of the training, when he would become the new receiver. It was clear to him what a terribly difficult and lonely life it was, despite the honor. "I can't request release either," Jonas pointed out. "It was in my rules." The giver laughed harshly. "I know that. They hammered out those rules after the failure 10 years ago." Jonas had heard again and again now the reference to the previous failure, but still did not know what happened 10 years before. "Giver," he said, "tell me what happened, please." The giver shrugged. "On the surface, it was quite simple. A receiver-to-be was selected, the way you were. The selection went smoothly, the ceremony was held, and the selection was made. A crowd cheered as they did for you. The new receiver was puzzled and a little frightened, as were you. My parents told me that she was a female. The giver nodded. Jonas thought of his favorite female, Fiona, and shivered. He wouldn't want his gentle friend to suffer the way he had, taking on the memories. What was she like? Asked the giver. The giver looked sad thinking about it. She was a remarkable young woman, very self-possessed and serene, intelligent, eager to learn. He shook his head and drew a deep breath. You know, Jonas, when she came to me in this room, when she presented herself to begin her training. Jonas interrupted him with a question. Can you tell me her name? My parents said it wasn't to be spoken again in the community, but couldn't you just say it to me just once? The giver hesitated painfully, as if saying the name aloud might be excruciating. Her name was Rosemary, he told Jonas finally. Rosemary, I like that name, the giver went on. When she came to me for the first time, she sat there in the chair where you sat on your first day, and she was eager and excited and a little scared. We talked, and I tried to explain things as well as I could. Well, the way you did to me? The giver chuckled ruefully. The explanations are difficult. The whole thing is so beyond one's experience, but I tried, and she listened carefully. Her eyes were very luminous, I remember. He looked up suddenly. Jonas, I gave you a memory that I told you was my favorite. I still have a shred of it left, the room with family and grandparents. Jonas nodded. Of course he remembered. Yes, he said. It had a wonderful feeling with it. You told me it was love. You can understand, then, that that's what I felt for Rosemary, the giver explained. I loved her. I feel it for you, too, he added. What happened to her? Jonas asked. Well, her training began. She received well, as you do. She was so enthusiastic, so delighted to experience all the new things. I remember her laughter. His voice faltered and trailed off. What happened? Jonas said after a moment. Please tell me. The giver closed his eyes. It broke my heart, Jonas, to transfer pain to her, but it was my job. It was what I had to do, the way I've had to do with you. The room was silent, and Jonas waited. Finally, the giver continued. 5 weeks. That was all. I gave her happy memories, a ride on a merry-go-round, a kitten to play with, a picnic. Sometimes I chose one just because I knew it would make her laugh, and I so treasured the sound of laughter in this room that had always been so silent. But she was like you, Jonas. She wanted to experience everything. She knew that it was a responsibility, and so she asked me for more difficult memories. Jonas held his breath for a moment. You didn't give her war, did you? Not just after 5 weeks? The giver shook his head and sighed. No, and I didn't give her physical pain. But I gave her loneliness, and I gave her loss. I transferred a memory of a child taken from its parents. That was the first one. She appeared stunned at its end. Jonas swallowed. Rosemary and her laughter had begun to seem real to him, and he pictured her looking up from the bed of memories, shocked. The giver continued. I backed off, gave her more little delights, but everything changed once she knew about pain. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't brave enough, Jonas suggested. The giver didn't respond to the question. She insisted that I continue, that I not spare her. She said it was her duty, and I knew, of course, that she was correct. I continued to bring myself to inflict physical pain on her, but I gave her anguish of many kinds: poverty, hunger, terror. I had to, Jonas. It was my job, and she had been chosen. The giver looked at him imploringly. Jonas stroked his hand. Finally, one afternoon, we finished for the day. It had been a hard session. I tried to finish, as I do with you, by transferring something happy and cheerful. But the times of laughter were gone by then. She stood up very silently, frowning, as if she were making a decision. And then she came over to me and put her arms around me, and she kissed my cheek. As Jonas watched, the giver stroked his own cheek, recalling the touch of Rosemary's lips 10 years before. She left here that day, left this room, and did not go back to her dwelling. I was notified by the speaker that she had gone directly to the chief elder and asked to be released. But it's against the rules. The receiver in training can't apply for It's in your rules, Jonas, but it wasn't in hers. She asked for release, and they had to give it to her. I never saw her again. So that was the failure, Jonas thought. It was obvious that it saddened the giver very deeply, but it didn't seem such a terrible thing after all. And he, Jonas, would never have done it, never have requested release, no matter how difficult his training had become. The giver needed a successor, and he had been chosen. A thought occurred to Jonas. Rosemary had been released very early in her training. What if something happened to him, Jonas? What had a whole year's worth of memory? He had a whole year's worth of memories now. Giver, he said, I can't request release, I know that. But what if something happens to me, an accident? What if I fell in the river like the little 4-year-old Caleb did? Well, that doesn't make sense because I'm a good swimmer, but what if I couldn't swim and I fell into the river and was lost? Then there wouldn't be a new receiver, but you would already have given away an awful lot of important memories. So even though they would select a new receiver, the memories would have gone to shreds, would have gone except for the shreds that you have left of them. And then what if, he started to laugh suddenly. I sound like my sister Lily, he said, amused at himself. The giver looked at him gravely. You just stay away from the river, my friend. The community lost Rosemary after 5 weeks, and it was a disaster for them. I don't know what the community would do if they lost you. Why was it a disaster, though? I think I mentioned to you once, the giver reminded him, that when she was gone, the memories came back to people. If you were to be lost in the river, Jonas, your memories would not be lost with you. Memories last forever. Rosemary had only 5 weeks' worth, and most of them were good ones, but there were a few of those terrible memories in there, the ones that had overwhelmed her. For a while, they overwhelmed the community, all those feelings. They'd never experienced real feelings before. I was so devastated by my own grief at her loss and my own feeling of failure that I didn't even try to help them through it. I was angry too. The giver was quiet for a moment, obviously thinking. You know, he said finally, if they lost you with all the training you've had now, they'd have all those memories again themselves. Jonas made a face. They'd hate that. They certainly would. They wouldn't know how to deal with it all. The only way I deal with it is by having you there to help me, Jonas pointed out with a sigh. The giver nodded. I suppose, he said slowly, that You could what? The giver was still deep in thought. After a moment he said, if you floated off in the river, I suppose I could help the whole community the way I've helped you. It's an interesting concept. I need to think about it some more. Maybe we'll talk about it again sometime, but not now. I'm glad you're a good swimmer, Jonas, but stay away from the river. He laughed a little, but the laughter was not light-hearted. His thoughts seemed to be elsewhere, and his eyes were very troubled. Bye, guys.